Jeff Strickland, Vice President of Operations for the Pacific National Exhibition. Thanks so much for joining us today. How you doing?
Good, guys. How are you doing?
We're doing well. We're getting through and want to hear how things are going with you. So tell us kind of what's been happening. You're on the west coast of Canada. So how has COVID-19 been affecting you?
Yeah, we've been keeping a close watch on this for, well, since probably early in the new year, as it's been developing across the country. And Vancouver and Washington State seem to have some of the early cases here. So we've been responding fairly aggressively over the past few weeks. I'm currently working from home, as you two are as well, and most of us throughout North America are right now if we can be. We operate an amusement park, a seasonal amusement park called Playland that's scheduled to open later in April and full time as of July when the school gets out for the summer. So we, just like many parks, especially the seasonal parks, we are putting our operations on hold. We have furloughed employees right now that we're prepping the park for opening, our mechanics and trades that we're doing all the great work to get our rides running properly. We're just taking it day by day right now. We were originally hoping for a June 1st opening date. It's probably realistically moving away from that closer to July, but at the same time, the landscape is changing by the hour. And so we're trying to be as agile as we can so that we don't want to miss any opportunities. At the same time, we don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. So like many parks, we're doing the best we can right now, just trying to salvage our budgets and trying to do what's best for the organization, and also desperately doing everything within our power to get our people back working to run the park and to deliver that service that we're proud of.
How are you strategizing that decision making, given that it's such a fluid situation and moving target of saying you were hoping by June 1st, now you're looking at July 1st? What's the strategy that goes into how you're monitoring everything and then being agile with it?
Yeah, one thing we're doing is, of course, we're looking at the Asian markets right now where COVID-19 has been more present for longer, and seeing how areas like China are recovering and getting back to that pre-COVID-19 crisis environment. Although they're not there yet, we expect that they'll come out of this faster than we will, as we're kind of in the middle of it now. We're still getting to the peak of it, but it's just having an open channel of communication with our department leads on the team, and obviously using Zoom as much as we can to collaborate, working from all different places remotely, and just setting ourselves with some realistic targets that we can aim for. And if the next day we have to change that target, we're doing that. So we're just staying on top of every briefing possible with our provincial leaders here and our federal leaders, giving general updates on what the government is doing to help us and what to expect. But looking across the industry, we're really looking to parks and regions within the various markets where COVID might be on the right side of getting through the storm, and seeing what those parks are doing and how the public responds as well to parks and events reopening.
So Jeff, I'm curious, thinking about when we are on the other side of this, and we, kind of before we started recording, we talked about, what people might want to do. We all said we'd love to ride a roller coaster right now. So what do you think that demand will be when we get on the other side of this?
Yeah, I think the expectations are going to change a little bit. I think guests coming to our park, if the mom is making that decision to bring the family to the park on a certain day, she would have various safety expectations and just service expectations of where do I park, how much is it to get in, what are your hours. Now the questions we fully expect are, how are you going to preserve our safety? What are you doing to mitigate the risk of virus and any sort of other challenges with that? And so our team has really taken a hard look at how we would respond to those questions, how we would elevate our service from a guest perspective, to know that we're being incredibly thoughtful about this, and that we're not just going to revert back to the old way, that we understand that there are going to be some anxieties and sensitivities that people have, and we want to ensure that our guests come to the park, as always, will feel safe. And typically that's always been the traditional topics of safety, whether it's ride safety, food safety, things like that. Well, now we have a whole new program and things to think about. And so everything from how we queue lines, how we provide hand wash stations, hand sanitizer stations, how do we wipe down the rides? These are questions that our group is having right now. And worst case scenario, or I guess the worst case scenario of having these conversations is if we are overshooting it a little bit with our assumptions, at least we'll come out on the end overcompensating as opposed to undercompensating for the change in the culture.
Can you shed some light onto what some of those steps might be, maybe not just from an action standpoint, but from a communication standpoint to your guests? Because you mentioned something that's really important, and that's that the expectations from your guests are going to be shifting. So when looking at something like cleanliness and health and safety, what is it that you're doing, not necessarily to improve standards in and of itself, but more so from that reassurance and kind of bringing back that consumer confidence that the guest knows, okay, P&E is really kind of taking the extra step to make sure that I know that I want to be safe when visiting the park from a cleanliness and germ standpoint.
Yeah, and as you know, as a lot of people continue to joke about, we're all getting inundated with various companies and what they're doing and what their plans look like. And I think there's a reason why companies are doing that, and it's important, and we would probably want to do the same. But as we get closer to actually looking at an opening date, right now what our team is doing is we're formulating FAQs and what they may look like. What questions would you have as a parent or as a guest coming to the park? What are some of the things that you would be perhaps worried about that we can address proactively before your visit to the park? So I think a lot of it is going to, we're going to see new information on our websites. We will be formulating a communication plan with our seasons pass holder group. I know that they're obviously our most loyal people, and they're sitting there wondering when will they get to ride the roller coasters. And so just having a strategy to keep them engaged is really important, and our team is working on that. Because they're not just going to have questions about will we give them a prorated discount or refund on their season's pass if the season is interrupted. They also have questions as to whether or not their experiences are still going to be as good, if not better. And so we want to, of course, have, I guess, dynamic communication to our various groups, our partners in the industry, our guests publicly on our website, and of course our season ticket holders. But mostly what we're focused on right now is our staff and making sure that we're providing them with all the reassurances that we can provide them, keeping them as engaged as possible. Because as we know, if we look after our people and educate them and inform them as much as possible, then that will be passed on to our guests. But we'll have to have some formal communication as well that we're going to be finalizing in the next little while as we get closer.
Jeff, I'm glad you mentioned the staff, because that's one of the things you and I were interacting on Twitter about, right? Because I asked that question, like, how do we keep our staff engaged and motivated? So how are you doing that right now? You mentioned, communication, that's a huge part of it. So what are some of those other things that you are doing to kind of help keep your teams engaged at this point?
Yeah, we're exploring different ways of doing that. One area we're looking at doing is a weekly town hall on Zoom, where we have furloughed employees are welcome on their own time if they choose to log in and receive an update from us. We're working on a schedule for that. I think fortunately we have this technology and a tool that can be used, whether it's just people on their smartphones or in front of a computer. But we are desperately now realizing that our focus should be primarily on, of course, business recovery, but also how do we keep our people engaged so that when it's time for them to come back, they'll be excited and ready to come back, but also just keeping them engaged as we owe it to them as this is something that is challenging, that's hitting us all personally. And we recognize that a good chunk of our team, and in some areas we refer to people as family, that they're sitting on the sidelines waiting, and the rest of us that are still working are trying desperately to get everything back online and get our park running. But of course, we have to be incredibly respectful of this crisis and knowing that it's going to take some time. But I don't have the perfect plan right now for how we're communicating with our employees. I just know that it's a big priority and that we're working through that. We're looking at having some Zoom town halls with specific groups or specific departments. And then we're also looking at having a newsletter that would get emailed out to our team, and just also having an email set up for just general feedback questions relating to everything from these temporary layoffs to the schedule to communication. If anyone has any questions, we want to ensure that there's at least a few channels where people can call in or email in any questions, whatever, regardless of what they are. We want to be able to respond to our staff as quickly as possible.
What are those Zoom town halls going to look like?
We were looking at just setting up a time, and if we had, say, a department of 50 people in one area, we would have a town hall where we would provide a corporate update, whether that's myself or our CEO or other senior management members, just providing some reassurance that we're working tirelessly to ensure that we come out of this on the right side, and also just to have real candid updates. I think it's okay to have a sense of humility right now as leaders, knowing that we're doing everything we can. And I think our staff appreciate and know that. But at the same time, we want to be able to provide them to ask those questions that are really genuine questions that they're concerned about, or that some of their employees have been asking, or been talking about, to clarify any issues. So we're going to give that a shot, and I can let you know after we have our first few how they're going. But I think it's better right now to err on the side of not being perfect than not doing anything at all. So being able to set up a Zoom and realizing that we may not have prepared ourselves for all the questions that get asked, at least we're there and we can circle back and provide better information if we get caught off guard. But I think we can't just sit and wait. We need to be providing a lot of effort to ensure that our teams are in the loop as much as possible, and that they know that we care and that we're doing everything that we can be doing right now.
So Jeff, I'm curious, what sort of questions are your team members asking? Is it about business? Is it about sort of their personal situation? I'm just curious kind of where their mindset is.
Yeah, we're fielding a lot of questions about employment insurance, any of these various government grants and subsidies that are coming out through the federal government and through our provincial government. So our HR team is almost acting like an EI office right now, answering questions and helping people out with that. But a lot of the questions are about, when will we know? Is our annual fair in August a go? And of course, right now it is. But the questions primarily are, how long will this last? How long do you think this will last? Knowing that we can't answer that, everyone has their own opinion, but just questions of, even what do you think is going on? How long do you think this will last for? When do you think realistically our park will be operating full time? And of course, they're asking the extreme questions too, which we're fielding those as best as we can, saying, hey, we're just taking it day by day here, but rest assured, we fully expect our business to get back to business as normal as quickly as possible. It's a successful business for a reason. Our guests in the market love coming to Playland. We have a very loyal fan base, so to speak. And when the weather hits here in Vancouver, and people want to ride our iconic roller coaster, and they will want to come back. It's just a matter of answering all those questions and assuring people that we'll get through this. It's just a matter of when and how.
So how has that been then? You mentioned, your loyal following of guests, which is so crucial to have during this time, especially in an age where we have this technology and social media. How has that been from a guest communication standpoint?
Yeah, for the most part, it's been with our social media. Our brand management and our marketing team have been running around answering all the questions. They've been doing a fantastic job of broadcasting news out through our social media channels, but also taking time to answer all those individual requests, those DMs, those emails, everything else that comes in. So we understand that the responses need to be situational at times, as people have their own questions. We have obviously clients that have many events on our site too, and we're working with them and their communication. So right now it's just run and gun, trying to not forget anyone and responding to all those requests that we continually get.
So Jeff, I'm curious. Oh, did you have something else?
No, go ahead, Matt.
I was just curious, before we started recording, you said that, everybody has a time when this really became real for them. I'm curious if you could share when that was for you.
Well, I got to tell you, the time where it became real for me was here comes my dog.
Okay, perfect.
It was Friday the 13th when it became real to me. I think that was around the same day that the NBA paused, but my mom had been sick for a while, dealing with the flu, and she'd been on a cruise a few weeks previous, but we didn't think it was anything related to COVID, of course, because she had been to our doctor and she'd been she'd been doing okay, was just having problems breathing, but everything escalated quickly, and we then sent her to the hospital on the 13th, where she was put in isolation, and then basically we're just in a holding pattern. We couldn't see her, we couldn't really talk to her, and we had to wait for the test results, which took a few days, as you know, if not longer, given the push. So for me, that's when things became real. She's been released and is fine now, but she was a positive test for COVID-19. And I got to tell you, the hardest thing, that's something I never thought about dealing with, that isn't the worry of the illness itself. It's knowing that there's someone you love tremendously in isolation, in a hospital, in this foreign environment where even the mentally strongest person can be overcome with anxiety and stress, because there's no answers at the time, and they just have to get through it. So having a family member in the hospital, knowing that you can't reach out to them, can't go see them, that's when it became real for me on the 13th of March. And then of course, that's when we started to work from home, distancing, all the talk about washing your hands, and we're all hoping that would be it. But of course, now here we are, closing our operations temporarily. And we were watching this wave come across from Asia and into Vancouver and into Washington State. And now you see the heat maps all over the world, really, and the numbers that we're dealing with. And so really everyone in our industry and our market at the P&E in Vancouver, we're just doing our part to self-isolate, to flatten that curve. And we feel that if we can do that the best we can, then that's the only way we're going to get through this better. So yeah, everyone has their own story, and that's mine. But fortunately, our staff are healthy. I haven't heard of anyone that is part of our organization testing positive for it yet. So we have that on our side. But my concern right now, as it relates to our staff, really is just to keep everyone safe and keep their families safe, and knowing that when it's time to return to work, we'll rebound okay. We will have pent-up demand, and our guests will come and enjoy the services that we have been offering for almost 100 years.
Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm very glad that your mother's been released, and that
Absolutely.
that's behind her and behind your whole family. How did that impact your work life? As here was this kind of overarching concern growing globally, and you had it so personally connected with you. How did that impact, I guess, the policies and the communication within P&E?
Yeah, and I have to say that typically we have work-life balance where our work stress isn't related to our home stress, whatever that may look like. This was overwhelming and almost surreal, because it was it was my personal life, my mom, and my worry for her, and also on the business side, our operations, our staffing, our business, just all the business continuity planning that we were trying to do. It was all connected. And then you turn on the news and it's all connected. And that's what's overwhelming for many people right now, I can only imagine, is that there's not a lot of separation of work and personal life, because it's all impacted equally by the COVID-19 crisis. And so, that's why it's a bit hard to step away. We've all had those stressful days at work where you think, okay, at least I can go home and go for a walk and not have to think about it for a while. We all need to find ways to pause from the stress, I guess. And that's where, I've been going for hikes with my family every day, but I think it's really important that we all do what keeps us healthy from a mental perspective. It just gives us a break from it, because really is very little reprieve right now, as there typically, or more or less than there typically is, of course.
Yeah, it really truly is everywhere. And, so, as somebody who already works from home, there's some differences, but there are some similarities. I'm still at home,
Yeah.
but my workload has changed and the things I'm doing have changed. And, Josh and I are interacting in different ways. So, those things have changed, but in many ways, because I am still here, it's harder for me to see what's really going on out there, so to speak.
Right.
And you kind of watch it, and you watch the news and things like that. But even just driving around town now and staying in my car, you see how little traffic there is, and you see how people are behaving differently, and really just how people, I think most of them are taking it seriously, which they should be, and isolating. But I think you make a great point that there's still some things you have to sort of keep normal, and going for hikes and doing those things that'll keep you healthy, and eating well, and those type of things, I think are still things that we should be concerned with.
Absolutely. Yeah. We have the time. It's just a matter of hitting pause from trying to solve all the world's problems, and then just going and looking after yourself for an hour, and then unpausing and getting back into it. I think that's really important, because we can get caught up in the cycle of just these overwhelming thoughts as we're trying to come up with answers to all these questions that are unanswerable sometimes. And so that's a real important part of this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Jeff, this has been great, and I really appreciate your time and your honesty, and, telling us your story. If there's anything else that you would kind of say as a message to the industry, what would that be?
Well, I think we just need to really, really focus on the silver linings. And I think we can all feel that we're going to come out of this better. And we're not going to go back to how things were 6 months ago or a year ago necessarily. But I think just looking how the world is responding, how people are caring more for each other, how we are kind of putting down the lines of, hopefully in most areas, politics and differences of opinions and things like that. We're all trying to solve this collectively. And I think when we come out of it, our industry and our world in general will be a better place, because we are as a human race taking on a protagonist that isn't human, and it's not a country, and it's not a person. It's a virus that we're all working to solve. And I think we're seeing so many examples of people celebrating our healthcare industry workers, our frontline workers, all this positive energy that is outpouring. And I think that'll stay with us for a while. And I really think that we're gonna come out of this as in a better world. Not to sound too cheesy, but when we come out of this, I think we'll all feel like we're in a better environment now.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I really appreciate you guys having me on, and I'm a fan of the show, so I look forward to all the good work that you guys continue to do. It's very helpful, and it's, we don't compete with other amusement parks in the regional market, so I'm happy to share any best practices we are able to come up with in the future. If there's any great ideas, I'd be happy to share them with anyone, and I'd love to learn what other parks are doing, because we can get through this if we share more, and it'll be better for all of us.
Absolutely. We'd love to have you on the podcast sometime in the near future.
Sounds good.
Do that. Yeah. In the meantime, Jeff, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate your insights and your messages, and stay safe, stay healthy, and likewise for everyone watching.
You too. Cheers, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.